and we do extract groundwater in combination and in excess of China and US put together. And that is also on numbers which we don't have clarity on, because even surface water is very hard to monitor, but groundwater becomes more complex because it's under the ground. We don't know who's pumping, and so there is a lot of complexities in monitoring it. So in terms of East India, in 2005, I think the groundwater market was opened, and one important aspect of the groundwater market is the technology and engineering has grown leaps and bounds, which means that you can spend less for a motor and less energy for a motor to get more water out. So the technology and engineering is constantly evolving, which gets it more access for the groundwater for everyone. Groundwater is also a climate change buffer. A lot of people forget this. Like when we have a climate change extreme, it could be flood or it could be drought. When there's too much water, like in Kerala and Chennai, which happened recently, you face drinking water problems. So where do you go to? You pump the groundwater and you drink it. It is not only floods and droughts, but because of the climate change extremes, the natural recharge which goes into the ground is slowed down. And in 2005, we did a study in West Bengal. We noticed that the groundwater, people think in Ganges Basin, you don't have to worry about groundwater because there's a lot of surface water which will recharge the groundwater. But that was not the case. The data showed clearly that with the increase of number of pumpers, the level of groundwater also decreased. So that is the first concern. So as you keep on reducing the aquifer or your water storage in your groundwater, it also starts to mingle with the natural contaminants, which is your geogenic materials, your rocks, salt, etc. So this actually releases a lot of salts in the water, and that is where we found the arsenic pollution in East India. In the West, so as the water level is coming down, the water contains more fluorides in Rajasthan and Gujarat, which if you drink, your bones get dissolved. So, and that is what is happening there. A lot of people are affected. With all these rainwater harvesting and recharge structures, what is happening is water is pushed faster into the ground. When you push faster into the ground, that also actually contaminates your water. So people have to be very careful in doing this. It starts with the user, the demand side. Okay, so we cannot always go to the government to ask for them to supply these management activities because you cannot control how and where you put a pump. Again, as I said, the cost of the pump has become so low that everyone has multiple pumps, not one pump, 2-3 pumps, where you go to the farmers and work with them to find different solutions, sustainable technologies, where farmers need to think beyond the cash crop, the farmers to grow these kind of crops where it is less intensive on water. So groundwater is being punished. We cannot go like this because what water we are using now maybe it recharged 100 years ago. No one has the data on it.
Thanks, Verghese. So in the context of Eastern India, we all know that now this second green revolution is being proposed and it's being promoted. This effort will be involving the use of the groundwater for irrigation. 39% of the net groundwater availability is right now being used. So there's a lot of potential that is being seen, and that there is low groundwater development and low water productivity and in the different states of the Eastern India. But at the same time, a study done by IIT Kharagpur and Athabasca University of Canada, this shows that there is a loss of utilizable groundwater storage at the rate of 5 cubic kilometer per year. So it's a matter of concern if this second green revolution is going to be promoted as planned. What is the crops? What are the major crops that are grown in the area? So in that we see that in the Kharif season, particularly crops like rice, groundnut and cotton, they are water guzzlers. It has already been mentioned that paddy is grown in all the 3 seasons. But besides that, even groundnut and cotton grown in different states are also consuming a lot of water.
And if you actually look at a change in cropping pattern, the trade-off between a drop in millet production from the 1950s till about now, and the rise of other crops, especially paddy, wheat, everything else. And if you actually estimate the footprint in terms of what this means, So first and foremost, this means the emergence of irrigated crops at the expense of nutri-cereals, which were dominantly rain-fed. The overall footprint of this also means that in the last 50, 60 years, we've actually seen a changing agroeconomy of crops that demand more and more water. So 400 billion cubic meters was added as crop water demand over a 66-year period in India. And okay, I'm sure part of it came from mainstream irrigation through dams and canals. But a large part of this came from the groundwater storage. At the same time, what you can pick up is even in the east, you have emerging shades of dark pink, which means that the stage of groundwater development in the east, especially with the 2017 latest CGWB analysis, you can see that a lot of districts, especially in West Bengal, parts of Jharkhand, parts of Bihar, over the last 3 or 4 assessments, we are actually seeing a greater and greater groundwater development in the region. And aggressive groundwater extraction means there are going to be consequences, like water wells going dry, groundwater contamination emerging even more strongly than what we have today. Because you have such a great deal of diversity, you require different strategies of managing groundwater. In the hard rock regions of eastern India, for example, you probably have annual recharge cycles, where the shallow aquifers get recharged every year, they get discharged every year. In the alluvial plains, in some of the regions where I believe SwitchON is also working, in West Bengal, for example, aquifers have higher storage capacities and their storages have possibly been accumulated over large periods of time. Their cycles of recharge are also over multi-year periods. Now, one of the fascinations in this world today is for recharge, and the whole idea of mission mode recharge. So, what is mission mode recharge? Mission mode recharge has come to exemplify, and I'm sorry to use the word exemplify, and I think it's important when we look at the Eastern Indian region to do away with this paradigm and think about recharge a little systematically of addition of groundwater to the existing storage in the aquifer, or addition of water to the existing storage in an aquifer. And it's something you can't do everywhere. It's something which needs a very strategic approach. And therefore, if we look at even at an internationally accepted system of recharge called Managed Aquifer Recharge, or MAR, it has several components. It has a catchment treatment component, has a patch component, it has what is called the subsurface storage component, so understanding the aquifers, and it has a recovery component, recovery in terms of usage. And therefore, when we deal with recharge, we need to deal with aquifers. And aquifers are entities in many dimensions. They also signify transitions. Again, an old favorite that we developed some years back, where it's not just about the relationship between recharge and extraction. It's really about how this relationship unfolds: water security, water quality, energy, and the ecosystem services that an aquifer provides. So this whole concept raises the question of 3 elements: sustainability, equity, and efficiency in groundwater management. So if you take a typical Indian village anywhere, and if you look at a broad sort of system of cropping today, and if you look at a sort of water budget on the demand side to begin with, what is the demand? The drinking water demand, the human drinking water demand of any village today, typical village, and I've shown the metrics there, is not even 0.1 millimeter. And water scarcity, we have severe drinking water stress, so much so that we have a whole program called the Jal Jeevan Mission now. But the fact of the matter is, unless and until you're able to deal with the larger demand, which is the crop water demand, which is the demand of applied water in agriculture. Even if you bring in livestock, human household domestic water, human drinking water, this demand is hardly less than 2 millimeters, is roughly around 2 millimeters a year. The applied water demand for your rain-fed crops is also abysmally small. The problem is, this is like your demand. If you look at the supply side, and if you look at two different systems, and I've used the basalt system here, but a crystalline system which is largely existing in the Eastern India region is roughly the same. Then a typical shallow aquifer, unconfined aquifer in a basalt can give you around 100 millimeters of water. Fairly robust, fairly good aquifer. Whereas a sandy aquifer, millimeters of water. And essentially that's where the inequity begins. The inequity does not begin only with the human element. It is endowed in nature. And it's important for us to understand these inequities, to understand these diversities when we go ahead with a strategy of groundwater management, whether in the Eastern Indian region or anywhere else in India. More so the Eastern Indian region, because there is an over-aggression of groundwater development in the region, which I think we must be ready to deal with in the years to come.
We have to prioritize if we are really looking forward to only recharge, or we should essentially work on the water footprint or water use efficiencies. Because in a given hydrogeological boundary, if we take the precipitation as the input to that particular boundary, and then after all the losses, you have the water available at the surface and the ground, so you are going to get that as the output of it. Output of that water. So the output by input into 100 gives you the larger level efficiency of that particular catchment or of that particular hydrogeological boundary. Now, can we come up with a kind of a water mark sheet for the households that see your efficiency is this much and is displayed at the village using a digital display board, that these are the households which are running through 60% of the water footprint or water use efficiency in terms of their agriculture, in terms of their household use, in terms of their biomass production use. So that is going to be a much more interesting where the investment has to be made. Should we really make the investments on recharge, or because the aquifers have their own capacities. You can't keep on increasing the recharge provisions for the aquifers. So one has to also take care of that to work towards the enhancing this water footprint or water use efficiencies in a given any unit area or any hydrogeological boundary.